Hey everybody, welcome to the Be Ready podcast, a space where we share information and have meaningful discussions about education and childhood development so that all of our children can be successful and just thrive in life. We realize that as caregivers, we juggle so many different things. We wear a lot of different hats and we're all so busy. So as moms, as educators, welcome to this discussion space where we share reliable information and make sure it's easily accessible so that we all can thrive. So, hello, co-host. How's everybody doing?
Hey.
All good.
So, we like to start with a recap of our last episode, and we realized that we were in the fall, about a month or so into school, and that it's likely that academic gaps and behavior gaps are starting to show up as that honeymoon phase is over between the students and their teachers. And so we really talked about how to understand like where our kids are when there are gaps, and then when we figure out the gaps, what do we do with them, right? I might be a parent, I realize something is going on. I go to have that conversation with the teacher. What do I say? What do I do? So some things that I remember from our last conversation is we talked about one, having the courage to ask the questions, ask them to break down the acronyms, just ask about things that you don't know and do not be ashamed to ask. They might be the expert in the classroom, but we are the expert on our kids. And so those things really need to come together in order for our kids to do well. So, having the courage to ask the questions, to be prepared, right? Do a little bit of research, be prepared going in, and explicitly ask, how do I make sure that my child's gaps are filled? Another thing I found really valuable is to ask for multiple sources of data. So I won't go into it now, but in our previous episode, we really broke down what these standardized tests that our kids take, what they really mean, and how they are only a snapshot of what they are doing on that day, in that hour, and that it doesn't give the full picture of who they are and what they can do. So really making sure that our conversations about our kids are just holistic and paint the full picture. Mm-hmm. And so am I missing anything? Did you all have any other highlights you want to share?
I think that was it. Like just really advocating, being the parent advocate for your child's education. And I think you hit it also, not being ashamed to ask the questions, because that's not your field and it's okay. But you are working together with the school for the village that is helping your child. So
Camila, last episode, you gave us a little snapshot into your life. A little story about some things that are going on with your son and his class, and really led us into a good conversation about teachers and about work being appropriate and meaningful. So give us the summary, and give us the update.
Let me tell you something, okay? So after email sent to this lovely lady, right? She then said she cannot meet with me on the Monday, whichever day we had scheduled, and not at all that week. She will reach back out to me. I let it happen. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And I believe this past Monday, we're looking at 3 weeks now, right? This past Monday, I sent her a message, another email saying, hey, it had been a while, but we finished the first quarter. So I need to make sure that we're all on the same page. I haven't seen any data come home. I haven't seen any homework being graded. I haven't seen any classwork come home. The last papers that I received were graded in September. So just so that we can all be on the same page, with the additional piece to the principal, to the assistant principal, as well as to the reading coach, because everybody's a stakeholder, right? Yes, ma'am.
You sent the email to all them people?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's an escalation from the last episode. because you were emailing the teacher, and then we had said,
Correct.
"Oh, are you going to talk to the principal?" Okay, so you went there. Just
Correct.
okay. Just for
So,
clarification, carry on.
um, absolutely. Because in between the emails, she's sending the class newsletter, she's sending field trip emails, all the things, but choosing, as I realized, not to respond to the email that holds her accountable for what she's doing in the classroom. In addition, since then, my son gets bare minimum like homework, on top of which she is giving Common Core homework, which, if you're familiar with the Common Core benchmarks, they are way left field of what Florida requirements are. So if he's going to be taking a Florida Best Benchmarks assessment that holds him accountable for those things, it would be nice if his homework matched that, right?
Please.
In addition, the Lexile level of the homework that she's sending home is so far below what he's expected to do. But some of the questioning, because again, they're not the best benchmarks. For example, he got sent home a poem, and the poem asked questions that are being asked of a fifth grade, the structure of the poem, and really asking the students to analyze why the author organized the poem that way. That is a fifth grade benchmark. He is just now second grade. This is the first poem he's read this year in second grade. And the structure of, and this is just because I have that additional knowledge, the structure of the poem, what kind of answer do you want him to give? Like, how will he know why the author wrote the rhyme scheme in this poem? Okay. So I have not received any communication from her, nothing. So I sent the email to everybody involved because, and I very politely said that we are all stakeholders in our children's education. So I want for all of us to be on the same page. All of us, whether there's the principal, the assistant principal, the reading coach, and the teacher, as well as myself, we all touch my student's educational academic career, right? His everything. So let's all be on the same page so that if you are sending home something that I am confused about, now I know so I can support you. Or if in general, what you're sending home has not been okayed by the reading coach because it's grossly misaligned and they have no idea that this is being sent home for my child or anybody else, now we're all on the same page for how we can help not just my son, but everybody else. So, again, there was no response
From anybody?
Well, I saw the principal and I talked to him in person, just in passing, like as we were leaving. And I said, "Did you get my email to the teacher that you and the AP were CC'd on?" And he was like, "Yeah, we got to talk." I said, "Yes, I'm glad that you recognize that because we absolutely do." So with the principal, we have our time set up, but the teacher is so unresponsive. And I get it, right? You don't want your craft to be questioned. You don't want any of that to happen. However, there's clearly a need for it, not just for the one child that I am responsible for, but for all the kids. And
Yeah.
so I get where she might be coming from, but then this is why I said parents need to hold teachers accountable, because we're not just going to go through the entire year. You haven't even sent home any of the parent reports for the test that he's taken. And quite frankly, when he comes home and I'm like, "Hey, how was your day? What'd you do today?" "Oh, we didn't get to math." "Oh, we were going to read, but we didn't get there." "Oh, but I used the computer." "What did you do on the computer?" "Typing club." Okay. Do you work with a teacher, like in like a small group of you guys at like the back table so that you guys can read together? No. Okay. So next week's conference,
Baby.
I signed up for it because conference night is next week, but best believe we'll be a little bit longer than the 15 minutes allotted. So I think now we're at the point where I'm not so concerned with the blurring of the lines between my professional and personal role, because now you are trying to evade your accountability. And that's not okay with me, because the way my young Black man is growing in his academic career, this is not conducive to that. And I don't appreciate it. So that's where we are. Right? Okay.
Right. I've got I've got words, but no, like this is wild.
It is
It's so
absolutely
wild
wild.
because I think it's so past just being like held accountable. Like now it is, and it's not like your request of her is not a personal attack, and now it has become something that I feel from the account of the story she is taking personal, and now it's kind of like a vengeance. Like I'm just gonna show you, but it is hurting children. Like
And
your
that's my
children.
thing. And
Thank
that is my thing. Like,
you.
you can feel however you want to about me. Don't take
Right.
it out on my child or on any other kids. Like, that's not okay.
Well, I wonder if it's a revenge thing or if it's a shame thing.
Yeah.
Like maybe she recognized that she just doesn't know. And then she's like, let me not keep sending information and keep responding because I'm digging myself into a hole.
Mm.
So maybe like putting up that defense, putting up a defense instead of just being like, you know what, can you come
Yeah.
let me glean off of your knowledge. But I am glad that you're using your position to advocate for your son because it's going to make a difference for all the other kids. Because I just keep thinking, like, could this be happening to other parents in that classroom, in other schools,
Mhm.
across the nation? And because the people don't have your background, they don't know that it's happening. But
Yeah.
one thing I thought was helpful that you model for us is asking questions of your child about what they're doing during the day,
Mhm.
right? Because I know we'll say, "Oh, how was your day? Good." Okay, we eye roll, but then like that's the end of the conversation. So really digging into like, what did you do today? What happened in math today? Like I think that's a good strategy to kind of figure out what's going on because we really don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
true. And I'm not taking my son's word as bond, like he is 7.
Right.
But like when you tell me basic stuff like, "Oh, we didn't get to math today, so that's why she said just leave our papers on the desk. We'll try to get to it tomorrow." Or we ran out of time, so we didn't really get to read. So she just gave us this paper. Okay. And so like I understand all the things that could be, right? At the same time, and I think we said it last time, if you are not willing to be an eternal learner, an eternal student, then this is not the role for you. Because if you can't face that, maybe you are wrong, maybe you are getting called on it. So it could be personal growth, then it's not the job for you.
Yeah. So then my question would be,
Mhm.
in the meantime, what are you doing to make sure like he's still getting what he needs? Like what does that look like? Because you said it's already been 3 weeks, and so I don't know that it's gonna get better sooner. So what do we
Yeah.
do in the meantime?
So some of the things that we even talked about last time, like he uses Khan Academy, which I monitor like his usage to make sure he's doing, because I know math is a weakness of his, but he loves it. So I sit with him. I put on based on what I recognized were some of the things that he was weak at, gave him the extra lessons on Khan Academy Kids, and I sit with him and we do extra practice. We always read, like bar none, but there's a lot more conversation. And again, because I have the knowledge of like how to question based on the benchmarks, then when we have our conversations about the chapter books that he's reading, then that. Um, Also, like when she sends home the spelling list, because I don't do the rote memorization, I happen to know the rules, like the spelling generalizations, then I can have him do application activities where we practice it. But again, that comes from me knowing.
Yeah, I had a question about that too, because I'm like what Deshaun said about, because sometimes teachers are kind of ashamed to say that they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they can come up with a little bit of intimidation as well when they don't know and they know that you know about certain
Mm-hmm.
things and they don't know. So it's, just even speaking from her perspective as to how do I approach this without, one, being rude,
Mm-hmm.
two, without I guess like really what's the word I'm looking for? Like um just like showing that I may not know, but it's just like the level of shame that comes along with it. There's a word that I'm looking for and I can't think of it right now. But um but I just keep hearing just like grace. And I understand, but everybody, I know I've made that mistake before with Destiny's teacher, because I expect me from them. And that oftentimes just isn't the reality, where they may not have the experience or the level of and how long did you say that she was teaching before? I remember you said she was teaching for a while. Yes, she was teaching for a while. And so sometimes that can also be not always be the best indicator of experience, because as you
Very
said,
much so.
they're not a student of the educational system, or just constantly being willing to learn. They may not necessarily know how, but she also does have to have a willing heart, which I'm totally on board for. But I'm very curious as to what's after you guys have that conversation, what that would look like.
Like, I've been trying to tread very lightly. Not only because of I don't want to be rude ever,
Right.
but also because I don't want there to be any consequences for Lucas in that situation. My thing, however, is I may not know, but I know how to write an email to say, sure, let's meet. Or if I don't want to meet, I can simply respond to an email. And for me, that's always my thing. It's communication. Because in between, there can be, okay, man, she really knows what she's talking about. So let me up my game a little bit. She's been to my professional learning experiences. So she knows that I know. And she knew that coming into her class. And the principal knew that when he put Lucas in her class. So at the very, very, very least, when I send an email,
you expect
respond. And if you say you're going to reach back out, reach back out. And the standard is 24 to 48 hours, not 3 weeks.
Correct.
And that's the bare minimum.
Something that you said you do that I like, and I want to point out for those who are listening, and remember for myself, is that you mentioned in working with Lucas during this time where you're not sure what's happening in the classroom, that when you do Khan Academy, you sit with him. And I think that is something to point out, because I know like my son does stuff and I don't sit with him while he's doing it all the time. So I think that's a good way to know like what your kids know and figure out where those gaps are, so you can see how to support them. So I just think that's golden and we need to highlight it. The other thing you mentioned was when he's reading his books, because you know the standards and what he should be learning, you're asking questions that are aligned to the benchmarks and the standards. Well, us regular folks, we don't know all that. But I think that something I do know about literacy development is that it's not always about reading verbatim the words that are on the page, right? That like talking about what they're seeing matters, talking about the character matters, the questions that come out of the story. So can you speak to that a little bit? Because I think, we're having this conversation about teacher confidence in practice, but I think there's also parent confidence in like, am I equipped to help my kid? So if I'm a parent who may not be a strong reader, how can I help my kids? How can I show them that literacy is important to me? And what strategies can I use to help them?
So that's valid. And again, yes, I do know the benchmark aligned question to be able to ask or to turn it into those benchmark aligned questions, but that's by and large not what the book discussion is, right? It's an opportunity to catch those. Oh, that's crazy. What do you think about that? It's the text to text, text to self, and text to world connections.
Mhm.
That's what's going to develop their literacy more so than benchmark aligned questioning.
100%.
So yeah, I know, like, if this is a poem, this is what the benchmark says. This is a good opportunity for me to inject that in there, but that's not the full basis of my conversation. The key though is I'm reading this with my kid. It is an active conversation. It's not just my child sitting on the couch. Now read for 30 minutes. Read out loud to me, or tonight I'll read to you. Or if we happen to have 2 copies of the book, or maybe I'm looking over your shoulder and we're reading it together. And it's the stopping points that are normal, just like in our regular conversation. You know, like our friends telling us stories, and you're like, wait. So what did you do? What happened after that? What did she say? Right? It's those moments. And those are the things that help bolster the literacy, the love of literacy, because it
Yeah.
becomes something connected to them. And then on the academic level, it builds that schema that you don't even realize becomes an anchor for now when they're learning and reading different types of text. They're like, oh, you know what? My mom read me this book one time about the skeletal system. Random books, but like things like that. So it's really just a let's talk. That's weird. That's funny. Haha, what would you do? That's crazy. I wouldn't do that, but you know,
I like that. I like that reframing of story time in a way that's fun. I know I was talking to a few family members one time about reading, and they were like, oh, we just used to read to go to sleep, right? And so I was like, huh, like that's true. Sometimes we're like, okay, let's read a story before bedtime, but how can we incorporate that into other parts of the day, or like set up little reading corners at the house where like it's fun, it's cozy, we got some lights, we got a lamp, we got a cute little seat, we have some fun books. So just I like that, making it like an experience, not just to go sit over there and read your book for 30 minutes so then I can check it off and say that you did it. Yeah. I think I would also like to share a little story. Because I think it's the opposite of what you're experiencing. I mentioned in our other podcast that we were having some more behavioral challenges with Cam this year in second grade. It's a mixed K1 class. So we're just seeing like some behaviors in him that we haven't seen before, that we don't really practice at home. So it's some stuff that I don't know if it's him. I don't know if it's a result of the environment. I don't know if it's some neurological things. ADHD runs in our family. So, is part of me feels like that might be manifesting itself now that he's in first grade. So a lot of different factors that is going on, right? So like I've talked and text with his teacher about it. My husband and I had a meeting with her about his behavior. Obviously, she's talked to him in the classroom, but it seems like things are escalating. So one thing I will say, I messaged her in the app about something I found out when I got home at like 8 o'clock at night, and she answered me back at 8 o'clock. So, and I didn't expect a response back because obviously it was after hours, but I think it kind of speaks to the fact that you haven't gotten a response in like 3 weeks. And I got one back after hours the same day. So there's that. But also like we had a conversation about it. Like she called me during the day and I was telling her like, hey, like, and we're both parents and we're both educators. So I think Jania always speaks to that relationship piece. So I think that she's really intentional about like leaning into the relationship and just being like, hey, I'm always open to learning. I'm not sure what to do. Deshaun, you're a parent educator too. Like, what do you know? And I'm like, girl, I don't really know. I taught middle school. This is first grade. So she even suggested that we sit down with my son, me, her, and my husband to all talk about the situation like with him and try to come up with a strategy. So I just wanted to like share that because that's something that's developing. I'll probably be talking to giving y'all an update on it when we come back. But just wanted to share that good example of teachers who are really out here like evening the playing field, I think, between themselves and parents and leaning into a relationship and really just trying to figure out like what is going to work in this situation. And I really appreciate that.
I think both of your stories are really like interesting because I know you said something about like confidence and learning, and like the parent confidence or the teacher confidence, and that may be like the underlying thing behind what's going on with Lucas's teacher, right? But I think there's also a piece in there for like vulnerability, right? Where like Deshawn, you're talking about your teacher, and both of you are like, well, I don't know, and that takes a lot of courage and like to be vulnerable and say like, I don't know. And I think that's really hard for some of us, myself included, but definitely when you're supposed to be the expert in that space, right? I'm supposed to be the expert and I have to be vulnerable and be like, I don't know. And somebody that's not in my classroom may know more, or I have to tell this parent like, hey, I don't know, and hope that they can receive that with grace. So I think it's a lot of those like soft social skills that really like we need. To be able to do this like work better and do it together, and make sure people are successful. But yeah,
I'm glad you brought up vulnerability because I will admit that I felt a little bit of shame like in the situation. Like, is it something that I did? Is it something that I didn't do? Like, you know, I'm authoritative, gentle parent. Should I be leaning into those authoritarian roots? Like, you know, what? So vulnerability is definitely present in this situation because it's delicate, and I did feel a little bit like, is it my fault? I don't know. So
yeah, and that's totally normal. I know even with Adrian, and we're in middle school, as we all know, but there are pieces where I'm like, oh, why is this happening? But it is what it is, and it doesn't make you like a worse parent or a better parent or any of that if your kid's not doing that. And so I think that's totally normal to have some of that shame because your child is a reflection of you, and apples don't fall far from the tree, but they're still like individuals as well. So yeah.
And the same thing for teachers, right? It's not like a reflection of who you are if you are not, I mean, if you are willing to be vulnerable and say, you know what, I don't know, but I can get there. Give me a minute. Let's figure this out together, because then that absolutely strengthens the bond. And I have absolutely no issues with that. But when you sit in your ignorance, that's a problem for me.
yeah.
For sure. I love that you said that, Keelan, because we're going to have our first session or our first segment in our podcast of We Teach / Parent Who We Are. And I know we've talked about this a couple of times as far as like the relationship. But really, We Teach Who We Are is a segment that's inspired by the article, The Heart of the Teacher, by author and educator Parker J. Palmer. And the idea here is that our personal experiences, our beliefs, and even unresolved traumas often shape the way that we parent or teach. So some of the things that we've talked about, like they really are shaping who we are. I know we've talked about that in our gentle parenting, authoritative parenting piece, like how that shows up for us. But when we react to our children or our students, it's not just about what's happening in that moment. It's not just about that homework. It's not just about that behavior. But it's about what we've been through and the lessons that we carry back with us. So the question today really is, who are you? Who are you? Deshawn, Camila, who are you?
I'm gonna need a prompt because
I got you. I got
big
you.
boss energy for sure.
I got you. So we're going to share these with our listeners too, but I do have some prompts for you all and some questions to think about. First is, when you think about who you are, your identity, what roles or labels feel the most significant? Is that you as a parent, as an educator, as a friend, as a partner? What are some of your biggest strengths, and how do you use those in your daily life? What fears or insecurities tend to influence your behavior? Yeah. Stress. We all experience stress. So how do you react when you're under stress? What does that reveal about you? Interesting. What beliefs about yourself did you inherit from your family? And which ones have you chosen to keep? And which ones have you let go?
I think these questions are great. I want to know these things about everybody, but I also feel like, oh, I need a minute to think about this. But I did recognize some of the things. I was like, I don't want to think about this.
It's definitely a loaded question, and that is the intent, because it really is about self-reflection and how those pieces of us, whether they are great pieces of us, that excellence part, or things that, like Deshawn and Latrice said, like you don't really want to talk about, but they all still show up in how you parent and how you teach. So whether you want to talk about them on the podcast, or that's something for you to journal and like work through privately, it's just so very important for you to interact with that so that you can then see how it shows up in your classroom, with your students, with your children, with your podcast hosts. So think about it more. Who are you?
Yeah. Just
Jenny, I really appreciate lean into vulnerability. Next time I'm gonna need a couch with
and a glass of wine.
Well, I have the glass of wine.
Wow.
But we will be sharing the questions, those prompts that Jania shared. We have a graphic because I think as parents and as teachers, it's easy to put up that wall, you know. And so I think those prompts that you gave us allow us to really think about like who we are and how we show up, so we can show up as our most healthy and best and vulnerable and relational selves for the people, for the future that we parent and that we serve. So thank you for that. And with that, we will sign off. Thanks for listening to the Be Ready podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, post your favorite clips, all the things, as we really work together with each other and with our community to share reliable information so that our kids can be successful. Bye, everybody.
Bye, y'all.